The sky is bleeding copper over Helland, and the dust tastes like old corn. Stay with me. A convoy is pinned in a dry riverbed that isn't dry enough to hide the smell of cordite. Hot wind is slapping canvas and skin. The world is reduced to angles. BMS broken stone. The hard geometry of death. Rounder cracking overhead in two distinct voices. The flat snap of supersonic passes and the deeper, uglier thump of impact in mud and metal. Somewhere up on the ridge line, a machine gun is walking fire down the line like it's counting bodies. 17 vehicles, 32 soldiers. One medic, Corporal Sloan Doc Thatcher, is on her knees in the gravel, shoulders hunched, hands already red. She doesn't look up when a next boast punches the hood of the lead MATV and turns pain into mist. Her world is the casualty in front of her. Specialist Clean, 19 years old, eyes wide, breathing like he's drowning on land. His femoral artery is torn. Bright blood is pumping in rhythmic surgeries that match the panic in his chest. Sloane's voice is calm, too calm, as if she's speaking to someone in a clinic instead of a kill zone. Hey, Klein, eyes on me. Breathe with me and out. You're not leaving. All right, not today. Her fingers move with ruthless precision. Turn high and tight. Cinch, twist, lock. The bleeding slows, then stops. Then the world tries to lie and pretend the worst part is over. But the firing line tells the truth. Doc, we're getting raked. Sergeant Briggs is shouting from behind the retire, his face smeared with dust and sweat. Where the hell is Overwatch? There should be a sniper team on the high ground. There should be a pair of glassy eyes in the distance calling shots, correcting fire, erasing threats before they become problems. There is nothing. The radio screams static. The platoon's designated marksman is down. His rifle twisted beside him like a broken limb. The gun truck's gunner is pinned, unable to lift his head without losing it. And the enemy is smart, staying beyond easy reach using distance like armor. 750 M. It's an ugly number, a number that turns ordinary courage into expensive mistakes. Sloane presses gauze into Klein's wound, then seals it with practiced force. Her other hand finds his wrist. Pulse. Weak. Racing. She feels the tremor in her own fingers and hates it. Not because she's scared. Fear is a tool if you know how to hold it. But because she recognizes the tremor, it's the tremor that comes right before she makes a promise disappear. Doc Briggs again louder. We've got two little patients, and we're boxed in. If that PKM keeps chewing, we're going to start losing vehicles. Sloane finally looks up. The ridge line is a thin, cruel smile against the sun. Dust plumes mark enemy positions. Small, disciplined puffs control fire. Someone up there knows what they are doing. And Sloane knows something else. Something she has kept buried under humor, under medic patches, under late-night inventory checks and routine sick call. She knows exactly how far 750M is. She knows what a 6.5 mil hold feels like in the shoulder. She knows how to read the wind off a mirage shimmer and a drifting scrap of plastic caught on Thor because her father taught her before she knew the alphabet. And her mother begged her to never become him. Maddox big, loud, the kind of soldier who acts invincible until the night gets quiet. Slides in next to her, panting. Doc, you got anything? Any magic in that back? Sloane's eyes flick down to the rifle lying near the designated marksman. Not her rifle, not her job, but it's there like a door left open in a burning house. She hears her mother's voice from a different world. Don't you ever carry that kind of death in your hands. Promise me, Sloane. She hears her father's voice, too, hard and gentle at once. If you can end a fight faster, you save lives. Sometimes the cleanest bandage is distance. Another burst hammers the convoy. A windshield explodes. Someone screams. Briggs' radio crackles. Duck, Briggs. This is 6. Say again on casualties. Briggs slams the handset. Way out of time. Sloane inhales. Then she does the one thing nobody expects from the comm medic with a steady hands. She crawls to the fallen rifle. Her fingers wrap around the grip like they've been waiting all her life. The distant ridge swims in heat haze. The enemy gun flashes again. One bright wink of arrogance. Sloane lifts the rifle, settles the stock in her shoulder, and the world narrows into a single decision, and right as her finger finds the trigger wall. The camera of history pauses on her face, dust stre, jaw set, eyes cold with focus, and the question hangs in the air like a held breath. Who is she really? Before we reveal why Sloan that Chan knew exactly how to kill a threat at 750 M, drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from and hit subscribe. Because what happened next didn't just save a convoy, it rewrote what a combat medic it could become. The trigger breaks, and the ridgeline loses its first man. The sound doesn't reach the convoy immediately. That's how far it is. First comes the recoil, then the shift in enemy fire, then a beat later, the faintest echo like a door closing in a distant hallway. The PCAM's rhythm stutters. A Bose goes wild, chewing dirt instead of metal. Maddox's mouth opens. He doesn't say anything at first. He just stays as Sloan like is watching someone step out of a storybook holding a weapon that shouldn't belong to them. Briggs' eyes narrow. Is a veteran. He's seen oddities. But this is different. Sloan is already working the bolt, breathing out slowly, her cheek welded to the stock, wind left to right. She murmurs not to them, but to herself. 2 miles per hour at mid-range. Mirage says, 3 at the ridge. Split it. She shifts a hair. The reticle settles again. Second shot. Another distant figure collapses behind a rock. The muzzle flash on the ridge dies like someone snuffed a match. The convoy's incoming fire drops by half in less than 10 seconds. And Sloan's hands, those healer hands, are steady as stone. But then a new sound rises under everything. The thin, rising whine of RPG motives. The enemy, suddenly desperate, is changing the game. A rocket arcs down toward the third vehicle. RPG. Someone screams. Sloan doesn't flinch. She's already scanning, already hunting the shooter's position. She catches movement, a shoulder, a tube, a flash of sunlight on metal. She breathes in. She breathes out. Third shot. The RPG launches anyway, but the man who fired it falls mid-motion, and the rocket's path wobbles, drifting. It slams into the dirt shore to the convoy and detonates in a brown blossom of shrapnel and smoke. No vehicle hit, no new casualties. For a fraction of a second, there is silence. The kind of silence that makes you realize you've been clenching your teeth so hard your jaw aches. Briggs leans in, voice low now, almost respectful despite himself. Doc, where the hell did you learn that? Sloan's gaze stays through the optic. Her voice is flat, clinical later. Because later is a luxury and the ridge still has teeth. She makes it 5 shots in total before the enemy breaks contact, scattering like ants under a boot, disappearing into folds of terrain that swallow them whole. 5 shots, 5 impacts, 5 problems are raised with a kind of precision that doesn't belong to a FOB medic. When it's over, Sloan sets the rifle down like it is a scalpel she's finished using. Her breathing is controlled, but her throat feels tight. She crawls back to Klein, back to blood and bandages, back to the job she's allowed herself to be. Briggs watches her for a long second, and in his eyes, a new calculation is forming, one that has nothing to do with maps or routes. Maddox finally finds his voice. Doc, he shakes his head like the words won't fit. You just did sniper work. Sloan presses a hand to Klein's chest, feels the rise and fall. She answers without looking up. I did what I had to. Fletcher, quiet, shapied, the one who usually notices everything first, crouches on the other side, rifle still pointed outward, security never dropping. You weren't surprised by the range, Fletcher says. Not a question, a statement. Sloan tightens the casualty's dressing, checks the turn time with a marker. Range is range. Fletcher's stare is steady. No, that was trained. Sloan's jaw flexes above them. Rotor blades start to thump the air. Dust off inbound. Cold in the moment, the ambush began. The sound is hope of the deadline. Briggs keys, is radio voice back to command tempo. 6. This is Briggs. We're stabilizing. 2. Urgent surgical 1. Urgent. LZ will be hot. Recommend gun run on that RG line grid. Stand by for exact. He pauses, glancing at Sloan, then back to the horizon. And now we may have found our overwatch. The dust-off helicopter drops in low. Flays popping. Door gun is scanning. Sloan helps load clean, her voice firm as she gives the 9-line updates as she presses his shoulder and says, "Stay with me. You're going home." Klein's eyes flutter, and for a second his fingers grab hers with surprising strength. "Doc, you're not." "I'm here," she says. "I'm right here." Then the bird lifts. The air goes violent, and the convoy is left with the ringing aftermath and the annoying question. Who is their medic, and why did she shoot like a ghost from another unit? The answer begins 48 hours earlier. Back at FOB Hansen, the air smells like diesel and instant coffee and sunbaked plywood. The place is a patchwork of Hesco berries and sand. A small city built to withstand destruction. Sloan Thatcher is 29 years old, 5 feet 7 inches, athletic but not bulky. The kind of soldier who looks like she belongs anywhere without drawing attention. Her hair is always contained. Her uniform is always squared away. Her medic bag looks heavier than it should, but she carries it like it's part of a skeleton. She's known as Doc because she earned it the way all real medics do. In the field under pressure, when someone's life is trying to slip away and your hands are the only thing holding the line. At 0500, she's already awake, inventorying trauma supplies under a dim red light. Chest seals, NPA airways, needle decompression kit, hemostatic oars, tourniquets, 8, not 6 because 6 is what the packing list says and 8 is what reality demands. Maddox strolls by the aid station entrance with a cup of coffee like it's a trophy. "Doc, you're going to start charging rent for that med bag. You carry it more than you carry your rifle." Sloan doesn't look up. "My rifle doesn't stop bleeding." Maddox grins. "My rifle stops plenty." She finally lifts her eyes, and there's a flicker of humor. "Yeah, and then you give me more work." He laughs, then leans in a little, lowering his voice. "Rude. Today's going to be spicy. Briggs says Intel's got chatter. You ready to babysit us again?" Sloan zips a pouch with a crisp sound. "I don't babysit. I stabilize." "Same thing." Maddox says unbothered, just with more guilt. Fletcher appears behind him, quiet as usual, checking his own gear, eyes already scanning like he can see threats through walls. "We roll in 2 hours." Fletcher says, "Doc, you're riding second vehicle again." Sloan nods. "Closest to the center. Best access." Maddox points at her. "She always wants best access. That's why she sits near me." Sloan's mouth twitches. "No, Maddox. That's why I sit near the loudest future casualty." Fletcher's lips curve. "Barely." Then he turns away, but there's a glint in his eye. The team trusts Sloan because she's consistent, calm, competent. She doesn't freeze. She doesn't dramatize. She just performs. And yet, there are moments, rare moments, when Sloan is alone and the mask slips. Like when she cleans her hands at the wash station, the water running brown, and she catches sight of her own reflection in a scratched mirror. For a second, she sees not a medic, but a child in a backyard, feet planted, cheek against a rifle stuck. A father's voice behind her shoulder. "Don't fight the recoil," Captain Garrett Thatcher had said. "Ride it. Let the rifle do what it's built to do. You just guide it." Her father had been dealt a force. An operator whose name wasn't supposed to exist. The kind of man who came home with quiet eyes and loud silences, who measured everything in risk and consequence. He trained her because he believed skill was safety and safety was love. Her mother had hated that is making you into a weapon. Her mother had whispered one night when Sloan was 14. Fingers gripping Sloan's shoulders like she could pull her back from some invisible edge. "Promise me you will be something else." And Sloan, young, torn between two worlds, had promised. She chose a medicine because it felt like the opposite of a rifle. She'd enlisted as a combat medic because she wanted to save what her father's world destroyed. She deployed because idealism doesn't survive in a classroom. She told herself she could carry only one kind of power, but power doesn't ask permission to exist. At 0700, briefing happens in a plywood shack with a map on the wall and a lieutenant who looks older than he should. Sergeant Briggs stand with arms crossed, listening, eyes narrowed. "We're moving supplies to Outpost DA. The lieutenant says 17 vehicles. No civilian traffic expected. Possible insurgent presence along phase line red. Likely IED threat. Small arms possible. Briggs speaks up. Any overwatch? The lieutenant hesitates, just a fraction too long. We requested asset, got diverted. Briggs' jaw tightens. So we're rolling blind. Fletcher taps a gloved finger on the map. This ridgeline here. He traces it. Dominates the route. That's where they'll sit with a PKM if they are smart. Maddox snorts. They usually smart right until they dead. Sloan listens without speaking, but inside her mind, she's already drawing range estimates. Angles, dead ground, lines of sight. She hates that part of herself. She also trusts it. After briefing, Briggs falls in a step beside Sloan outside, his voice low enough to keep it private. You good, Doc? Sloan nods always. Briggs studies her face, is not easily fooled. You sleep enough? He grunts. Keep your head on a swivel. We've had 3 convoys hit within 10 clicks in the last 2 weeks. Sloan meets his eyes. I know. Briggs pauses. And Doc, if things go sideways, you stay in your lane. You treat. You don't chase. Sloan's expression doesn't change, but her stomach tightens. Yes, Sergeant. Briggs nods like it's settled, then walks off. Sloan watches his back. The weight of those words settling on her like extra armor. Stay in your lane. She wants to. God, she wants to. 2 hours later, the convoy rolls out. Engines rumble. Radios crackle. Dust rises in thick plumes that coat teeth and eyelashes. The sun climbs, turning the world into a bright, unforgiving stage. Sloan rides in the second vehicle, seated behind the gunner, med bag between her boots. She checks her radio, checks her supplies, checks the faces of the soldiers around her. Maddox is in the same vehicle, of course, because the universe has a sense of humor. Is in the turret, scanning through his optic, the M240 mounted like a promise. He speaks down to her through the headset. Doc, if we hit an IED, I want you to remember something. Sloan tilts her head. What? I look better with all my limbs. Sloan deadpants. Noted. Fletcher's voice comes over the net from the lead vehicle. Spacing. Keep 50 eyes on the ridge. Briggs responds. Copy. Maintain interval. The route is a ribbon of hard-packed earth cut through low hills and scattered scrub. A few mud structures in the distance, a line of trees that looks too neat to be natural. Sloan watches the ground like it's trying to trick her, because it is. At minute 12, the first sign comes a broken piece of plastic in the road that shouldn't be there. At minute 14, a disturbed patch of dot near a killet. At minute 16, a dog that doesn't bark just stays. Sloan feels the hairs on her arms lift. A medic learns patterns. A medic learns when the world is holding its breath. At minute 19, the lead vehicle brakes hard over the radio. Possible command wire. Halt. Briggs' voice. All vehicles freeze. Security out. Eyes out. Sloan's door opens. Heat floods in. She steps out carefully. Boots crunching gravel. Milbe Sloan. Soldiers fan out, forming a loose perimeter. Rifles up. Fletcher moves like a shadow, scanning, pointing. Maddox speaks from above. Doc, you see that ridge? I don't like that ridge. Sloan looks. The ridge line sits like a spine against the sky. Nothing obvious, but nothing obvious is never comforting. An EOD tech moves forward, slow and deliberate, inspecting the suspected device. Minutes stretch. Radios stay low. Sloan's heart rate remains steady, but her mind is active, mapping the terrain the way her father taught her, identifying firing points, escape routes, where an ambush would blossom like a planned infection. Then a voice crackles on the net. Not theirs. A burst of push to quick, excited Fletcher stiffens. Contact likely, eyes out. Briggs, gunners, scan. No one bunch up. Sloan's hand tightens on her medbag strap. And then it happens not with a single explosion, but with a sound like the world tearing. The first burst of PKM fire comes from the ridge high angle hammering into the lead vehicle's engine block. The second bose comes from the left flank lower, catching the convoy's midsection. The third is a sharp crack of accurate rifles. The ambush is led. Planned coordinated. Contact front. Fletcher shouts over the radio. RGL line. Contact left. Another voice yells. RPG. Someone screams. The EOD tech drops. Crawling back. Soldiers die for cover. Dust erupts from impacts like the ground is boiling. Sloane is moving before she thinks because movement is her language. A soldier near the third vehicle is down. Screaming, hand clamped to his neck. Blood threads through his fingers. Sloane slides to him on her knees, pushing his hand aside, exposing the wound. Venous bleed, not arterial yet. She packs gauze with firm pressure. "Look at me," she says. "You gotta keep breathing. You understand?" His eyes are huge. "I can't." "You can," Sloane says. Voice steel. "Breathe in. Out. Don't fight it." Above them, Maddox opens up with the M240. The guns roar, drowning thought. "Let's go. Let's go." But the enemy is far, and their fire is disciplined. The ridge gunner keeps the convoy pinned. The left flank shooters keep heads down. Briggs yells into the net. "Where's our DMR? Where's our marksman?" A response, strained down, is hit. Sloane feels the pressure of time, like hand around her throat. This is the moment that will later become legend. This is the moment where a medic's job and a sniper's job collide in the same heartbeat. Sloane finishes stabilizing the neck wound, applies a pressure dressing, then drags the soldier behind tire. She scans for her next casualty. A blast RPG impact rocks the fourth vehicle. Shrapnel screams through air. A soldier drops, clutching his leg, blood soaking his pant. Sloane runs low, crouched, feeling round snap overhead. She reaches him, rips open his pant leg. The wound is ugly. Deep laceration, heavy bleeding. She slaps a tourniquet on, cinches, twists, locks. "Doc," he gasps. You're fine," she says. "You're hurt, not dead. There's a difference." He lets out a sub-laugh that turns into a grimace. Maddox's voice again. More strained now. "Doc, we're pinned. That ridge is eating us." Fletcher calls out. "We need to break their machine gun. We need distance fire. Briggs, we don't have it." Sloane's mind flashes uninvited to her father's range training, to the weight of a rifle, to the discipline of breath, to the calm that comes when you accept what you are capable of. She hears her mother's plea. "Promise me." She feels her own promise like a shackle. Then she looks at the soldier in front of her, pale, shaking, alive only because she was quick. She looks at the convoy, pinned, vulnerable, and she understands something with brutal clarity. A promise that costs lives is not a promise. It's a mistake. Sloane looks toward the fallen designated marksman. His rifle is there, half covered in dust. She makes her decision, not with drama, with necessity. She crawls to the rifle, keeping low, feeling the dirt scrape her elbows. She reaches it, checks it in one practiced motion. Mag seated, bolt forward, optic intact. It's a semi-auto precision platform setup for distance. A DMR configuration, likely 7.62, 6 feet 2 inches, capable enough at 750 if the shooter is. The shooter is. Sloane pulls it into her shoulder. Her cheek weld settles naturally, like she's returning home to a place she pretended she'd forgotten. In her head, numbers line up. Distance 750 m, drop significant. Wind cross variable. Target, PKM gunner prone behind rock. Time, less than 3 minutes before someone dies who doesn't have to. She finds him through the optic. She sees the muzzle flash. She sees the silhouette. She exhales halfway and holds. The first shot breaks. We already know what happens next. The Urgeline begins to lose its bite. But what the convoy doesn't know, what even Briggs doesn't know yet, is that Sloane's shots aren't lucky. They are measured. Between shots, Sloane is whispering to herself. A private ritual from childhood. Front sight, breath, press. She adjusts for wind, watches impact through glass, corrects by 10 mil. Her fourth shot catches a shooter on the left flank who thought he was safe behind a mud wall. Her fifth breaks the rhythm completely. The enemy fire collapses into scattered panic. And in that thin pocket of reduced, incoming fire, Briggs seizes the moment. "Push security," he shouts. "Get us out of this kill zone." Drivers slam gears. Vehicles lurch forward. Ty is spitting dirt. Gunners fire, suppressing. Soldiers drag wounded into safer positions as they move. Sloane drops the rifle and goes back to medicine like she never left it, as if she didn't just reshape the battlefield with 5 rounds. A dust-off bird arrives 12 minutes later, guided him by smoke and radio calls, and the wounded are loaded out. The convoy, battered but moving, limps back toward FOB Hansen under a harsh sun. Inside the vehicle on the ride back, nobody speaks for the first 5 minutes. The adrenaline is draining. The reality is sinking in. Maddox finally breaks the silence. Voice quieter than Sloan has ever heard it. "Doc, you saved us." Sloan keeps her eyes on the horizon. "We saved each other." Fletcher sits across from her. Elbows on knees, gaze sharp. "I've seen trained shooters miss easier shots." Fletcher says, "You didn't miss." Sloan's throat tightens. She answers with the simplest truth she can manage. "I had good teachers." Briggs is riding in the lead vehicle. But later, back on the FOB, he finds Sloan near the aid station, where she's cleaning blood off her hands for the third time. He stands in the doorway for a moment, watching her with the kind of silence that carries weight. "Doc," he says. Sloan looks up. "Sergeant." Briggs steps closer, lowering his voice so the others can't hear. "I'm not going to ask you to explain it in front of the platoon." Sloan's shoulders loosen a fraction. "But I'm going to ask you to explain it to me." Briggs continues. "Because I need to know what I'm dealing with." Sloan swallows. "You're dealing with a medic." Briggs' eyes don't move. "You're dealing with a rifle like it's been in your hand a long time." Sloan wipes her hands, sets the rag down carefully. "My dad," she says. The words feel like stepping on a thin ice. "He trained me before I enlisted, before I chose medical." Briggs' brow furrows. "Your dad was military." Sloan hesitates. "He wasn't supposed to exist. He was special operations," she says carefully. Briggs exhales slowly, processing. "Name." Sloan's mouth is dry. "Captain Garrett Thatcher." Briggs goes still. Even if he doesn't know the details, he recognizes the kind of name that travels and whispers. The kind of man whose reputation survives even when the paperwork doesn't. Briggs looks at Sloan with something new. Not suspicion, not judgment, understanding. "That's why you kept your head," Briggs says. "That's why you saw the ridge before we did." Sloan's voice is quiet. "I didn't want to use it." Briggs nods. "But you did." She meets his gaze. "Because people were dying." Briggs watches her for a long second. Then he says something Sloan doesn't expect. "I'm glad you broke your promise," he says. "Whatever promise it was." Sloan's breath catches. Briggs steps back, gets some rest. "And Doc," he pauses at the doorway. "Don't think this is staying quiet. 6 already asked me what happened. So did Battalion." Sloan's stomach drops. "What did you say?" Briggs' expression is grim. "I said our medic saved our convoy from 750 M. Sloan closes her eyes for a moment. The consequences start lining up like targets. Later that night, the FOB is restless. Whispers move through the air like smoke. The story spreads, changing shape, gaining shine. Doc made a 700-meter shot. No, man, it was 900. She did it with one hand while bandaging someone. Sloan tries to ignore it, tries to bury herself in routine, but routine doesn't stop attention. At 21:30, a runner finds her. Corporal Thatcher, Sergeant Briggs says, "Report to TOC." Now, Sloan feels her heartbeat spike, then settle. She wipes her hands, squares her shoulders, and follows. The Tactical Operations Center is a hive of radios and screens and tired eyes. When Sloan enters, Briggs is there along with a lieutenant, and most importantly, a man she doesn't recognize. The stranger is in civilian clothes, but he moves like military. He has the posture of someone who has carried weight and doesn't talk about it. His eyes are sharp. His face is expressionless. He looks at Sloan like he already knows her. The lieutenant clears his throat. "Corporal Thatcher, this is Mr. Harlow." Harlow steps forward. His voice is calm, almost polite. "Corporal," he says, "I'm here because today you did something that shouldn't have been possible." Sloan doesn't answer. Harlow continues. "We reviewed the gun camera. We reviewed the radio traffic. We interviewed 3 soldiers. Same story every time. A combat medic took a designated marksman rifle and neutralized 5 threats at extended range under fire, while simultaneously managing casualties." He pauses, letting the words hang. "Who taught you?" he asks. Sloan's mouth feels like sand. "My father." Hollow's gaze flicks briefly to Briggs, then back to Sloan. "Captain Garrett Thatcher." Sloan's eyes sharpen. You knew him. Hollow's expression changes just slightly, like a door opening a crack. I did, he says, and he left something for you. He reaches into a bag and produces an envelope. It's worn, edges soften like it's been handled too many times. Sloane's breath catches because she recognizes the handwriting on the front. Her father's for a second. She is 19 again, standing at a funeral where the casket was closed and the stories were incomplete, and her mother's hand shook as she tried not to cry in front of strangers. Sloane takes the envelope carefully like it might detonate. Harlow's voice is low. He asks that it be delivered if you ever cross the line he trained you for. Sloane swallows. Is dead. Harrow nods once. Yes. The TOC's noise fades in Sloane's ears. She looks at the envelope, fingers tight around it. The lieutenant shifts uncomfortably. Briggs watches her with something like concern. Harlow steps back, giving her space. Read it when you alone, he says. Then we'll talk. Sloane's voice is barely a whisper. Talk about what? Harrow's eyes hold hairs. About what you are, he says, and what you could become. That night, Sloane sits alone in her chew. The small metal box that serves as her room. The fan hums. Distant generators throb. Somewhere far off, laughter cracks like a weak signal. She opens the envelope with careful hands. Inside is a letter and a single object. A patch. Not a unit patch, not a flag. A simple plain circle with a crosshair and a medical symbol intertwined. Something her father must have designed privately, like a confession. Sloane's throat tightens as she unfolds the letter. Her father's words hit like control fire. Sloane, if you're reading this, it means you finally did what I trained you to do and what I prayed you'd never have to. That's the curse of loving someone in a dangerous world. You prepare them for storms, and then you hope the sky stays clay. Your mother wanted you safe. I wanted you capable. I was wrong to think those were separate goals. You can be a healer without being helpless. You could be a warrior without losing your soul. I know you made promises. I know you tried to outrun the part of you that sees distance like a solution. But listen to me, the weapon is never the problem. The hands are, the heart is, the discipline is. If you use that skill today, it means someone's life depended on you doing it. And if you did it clean, controlled, and with purpose, then you honored the best part of what I tried to teach you. I'm sorry I wasn't there to show you how to carry both sides of yourself without breaking. So, I'm giving you permission in ink and blood and regret to be both. Be the medic. Be the marksman. Be the calm in chaos. And if anyone ever tells you that you have to choose, tell them your father said they are wrong. Dad. Sloane reads it twice, then a third time. When she's done, she presses the letter to her forehead, eyes squeezed shut, and the first tear slips down before she can stop it. It isn't weakness, it's release. Her radio crackles faintly with distant traffic. The war doesn't pause for letters, but Sloane's world has shifted. The next morning, Briggs finds Sloane at the range, a dusty stretch of Bayon targets where soldiers go to remember what their weapons feel like. She's there alone, rifle broken down on a mat. Not because she's showing off, because she's trying to decide what kind of person she is allowed to be. Briggs approaches quietly. Couldn't sleep. Sloane shakes her head. Read something. Briggs nods like he knows. From your dad. Sloane hesitates, then nods. Briggs sits on a crate nearby, resting his elbows on his knees. How you holding up? Sloane's voice is steady. I don't know. Briggs snorts softly. That's honest. She looks at him. What does battalion want? Briggs' expression tightens. They want answers. They want to know if you're a liability or an asset. Sloane's eyes harden. I'm a medic. Briggs points to the rifle parts and that. Sloane exhales. I didn't want this. Briggs watches her, but you can do it. Sloane doesn't answer. Briggs leans forward. Look, document. I've seen soldiers who want to be heroes. They chase it. They get people killed. You're not that. You didn't chase. You responded. Sloane's jaw clenches. If I become... She stops, searching for words that won't betray her mother. If I lean into that side of me, it changes what I am. Briggs' voice is quiet. Maybe it expands it. Before Sloane can answer, a vehicle rolls up. 2 men get out. One in uniform, one in civilian clothes. Harlow is the civilian. The uniform man is a major. His presence tightens the air. The major approaches. Eyes on Sloane. Corporal Thatcher. Sloane stands. Sir, the major's expression is professional. Unreadable. Yesterday, you saved a convoy. Sloane keeps her voice neutral. I did my job. The major studies her. Your job description doesn't include precision engagement at 750 m. Sloane doesn't flinch. It did yesterday. Harlow's mouth twitches like he finds that interesting. The major continues. We're exploring a capability gap. A hybrid role. Someone who can provide overwatch and immediate trauma care. We've discussed it for years. No one's made it real. He steps closer. You did. Sloane feels her pulse quicken. Sir, with respect, I'm not trying to change doctrine. The mage's eyes sharpen. Doctrine changes whether you want it to or not. The question is whether it changes because we learn or because we bleed. He pauses, then delivers the words that turn Sloane's life onto a new axis. We can put you in a school slot. Sloane's throat goes dry. What school, sir? The major answers simply Army Sniper School. Briggs' eyebrows lift. Fletcher and Maddox aren't there. But if they were, Maddox would have fallen over. Sloane's mind races. Images flash. Her mother's face. Her father's letter. The ridgeline. Klein's pale eyes. The feeling of the rifle in her shoulder. Harlow watches her closely. You don't have to decide right now, he says. But if you say yes, it won't be easy. People will resist. Some will try to break you. Sloane's voice is quiet. Why? Hollow's answer is blunt. Because you'll make them question what they think they are. The major adds, if you attend, you'll still be a medic, but you'll also be trained to end fights before they create casualties. Sloane's hands curl into fists at her sides. She feels the old promise tug at her like a leash. Then she remembers the new permission in her father's ink. She looks at Briggs. He doesn't speak, but his eyes say, choose what saves more lives. Sloane looks back at the major. So she says steady now. If I go, I want it, Clay. I'm not leaving medicine behind. The major nods. Good, because that's the point. Harlow steps closer, lowering his voice so it feels personal. Your father used to say something. He said, the best operators aren't the ones who love violence. They're the ones who hate waste. Sloane's throat tightens. He said that. Harlow nods more than once. Sloane inhales. The air tastes like dust and diesel and inevitability. She makes the decision. I'll go, she says. The major nods once, satisfied. Good. Slot opens in 3 weeks. You'll prep. You'll train. And Thatcher. He pauses, eyes hard. You'll be under microscope. You'll represent something new. Don't give anyone an excuse to kill it. Sloane's voice is firm. Yes, sir. The major and Harlow leave as quickly as they came, their vehicle disappearing into the FOB's churn. Briggs exhales slowly like he's been holding air for a long time. Well, he says, guess you're about to make some enemies. Sloane looks down at the rifle parts on the mat. She feels something in her chest that isn't fear and isn't excitement. It's purpose-heavy and sharp. I already have one, she says quietly. Briggs frowns. Who? Sloane's eyes lift toward the horizon, toward the memory of that ridge line. The part of me that thinks I don't deserve to be both, she says. Briggs' expression softens. Rare for him. Then kill that part. Sloane's mouth twitches despite herself. That's a very sniper school answer. Briggs stands, claps her shoulder gently. Get ready. Document. Sloane watches him walk away. Then she begins assembling the rifle with hands that don't shake because the clock has started. 3 weeks, 21 days, 504 hours to become something that doesn't have a name yet. And somewhere out there in training pipelines, in old school minds, in rival candidates who will see her as a threat, people are already sharpening their reasons to doubt her. Sloane picks up the bolt, slides it into place, and locks it home with a clean metallic click. The sound is small, but it feels like a door closing behind her. And as the sun climbs higher, baking the range, Sloane whispers to herself, half prayer, half promise. Words she hasn't said in years. I can be both. Far away, beyond the wire, a distant explosion thumps like a reminder. The war is still waiting. And the next chapter is going to test whether Sloane Thatcher's hands can carry a rifle and a lifeline at the same time without dropping either. Because when she arrives at sniper school, the first thing she'll learn is this. The instructors don't care about her story. They only care about her shots. And someone there already plans to make sure she misses. 3 weeks moved like 3 days. Sloane packed her gear with the same deliberate calm she brought to everything. Each item placed with intention. Nothing wasted, nothing forgotten. Her trauma bag went to Briggs for safekeeping. A gesture that felt heavier than it looked. He held it with both hands like she'd handed him something sacred. "I'll keep it sharp," he said. Sloane slung her kit over one shoulder. "Don't let Maddox touch my chest seals." Briggs almost smiled. "I'll guard them with my life." Maddox, standing nearby, pretending he wasn't listening, put a hand over his heart. "That hurts. Document genuinely." Fletcher stepped forward, last quiet, as always, and extended his hand. Sloane shook it. "Come back, Mina," Fletcher said. Sloane tilted her head. "I'm a medic." Fletcher's eyes held hairs. "You're more than that now." The convoy to Bagram Mayfield was uneventful, just heat and road and the sound of tires eating distance. Sloane sat by the window, watching Afghanistan blur past, and thought about her father, about the letter she'd folded into her breast pocket, about the patch stitched together from two symbols that had no business sharing the same fabric. She thought about the rich. She thought about Clean. Alive, recovering, already sending emails from Lansall. He'd sent her one message document. "You're insane." "Thank you, Clean." She read it 11 times. The flight from Bagram to Fort Benning felt like crossing between universes. Afghanistan was loud in every sense. Tactile, immediate, urgent. Fort Benning was a different kind of pressure. Institutional, measured, competitive. The Army Sniper School sat on Georgia red clay like it had grown from it. Low buildings, long ranges, the smell of gun oil and cut grass. A world designed to build patience and erase weakness. Sloane arrived on a Tuesday morning with 6 other candidates. For her infantry, one was a ranger, one was special forces. None of them were medics. The lead instructor was Master Sergeant Derek Voss. Broad-shouldered tobacco voice, eyes that had been squinting through scope since before Sloane was a teenager. He walked the line of candidates with his hands behind his back, evaluating each one like a jeweler checking diamonds. He stopped in front of Sloane. He looked at her rank, at her MOS patch, at the Metacross on her arm. He looked back at her face. "Thatcher," he said, "Master Sergeant." "Combat medic." "Yes, Master Sergeant. Tell me why you're here." Sloane held his gaze to learn precision engagement. Master Sergeant Voss's expression didn't change. And why would a medic need to do that? The whole line was listening. Everyone was staring. Sloane felt the weight of it, the skepticism, the curiosity, the faint hostility from men who had trained years for a slot she'd received on the strength of one afternoon. Sloane answered clearly, because sometimes the fastest way to stop a casualty is to prevent the casualty. Voss held her gaze for a long second. Nobody moved. Then Voss turned away without comment and continued down the line. Not an approval, not a dismissal, a wait and see, which in sniper school was the best you could ask for on day one. The first week was deliberate humiliation. That's not cruelty. It's engineering. Instructors needed to find the floor of every candidate to peel back confidence and see what was underneath. Some candidates had polished surfaces with nothing supporting them. They broke fast and quiet. Sloane didn't break, but she bent. The stalking exercises, low crawling through thick Georgia brush in full ghillie suit covering hundreds of meters and hours moving so slowly that the body protested with muscle cramps and heat sickness, were physical punishment disguised as skill development. Sloane's medic background was a strange advantage. She understood physiological stress better than most. She recognized the signs of heat exhaustion in herself. She paced her water intake precisely. She stretched correctly. She treated her body like a patient. But the mental grind was something else. At night, after range work and classroom instruction, the candidates huddled in exhausted silence. Some read, some slept immediately. Most stayed at ceilings. Sloane stared at the patch from her father's letter. The medic cross and the crosshair intertwined. "It's in a part 1. Say part 2 when you're ready." She was already in part 2. The candidate in the bunk beside her was Staff Sergeant Tessarkin, 27 years old, infantry, compact, intense, with dark hair cropped close and eyes that moved like radar, sweeping for contacts. She'd earned her slot through 3 combat deployments in a record qualification score at her division's marksmanship competition. Tessa Larkin was by any objective measure excellent. She was also in the first week Sloane's biggest problem. It started during the observation exercise on day 4. Candidates were given a grid reference, a limited time window, and a list of objects to identify in a designated field. Sloane found 9 of the 11 objects. Tessa found 10. In the debrief, when Voss pointed this out, Tessa's eyes slid sideways to Sloane and held there, not hostile exactly, but appraising, calculating like she was trying to figure out if a medic in a sniper school was a challenge or an insult. After debrief, Tessa fell in a step beside Sloane outside. "Fob Hansen," Tessa said without preamble. Sloane looked at her. "What about it?" "I heard about the convoy. 5 shots, 750 M." Tessa's voice was flat. "Factual. Is it true?" Sloane kept walking. "The radio traffic is accurate." Tessa nodded slowly. "Impressive." Sloane caught something in her tone. But Tessa looked at her directly now. "But it's one incident. One day, 5 shots under adrenaline is not the same as precision shooting under control conditions." Sloane stopped walking. She faced Tessa fully. "You're right," Sloane said. Tessa blinked, clearly not expecting agreement. Sloane continued. 5 shots in combat is one data point. The school is where we find out if it's a pattern." She paused. "Same goes for you." Tessa's jaw tightened. Then slowly, something softened behind her eyes. Not quite respect yet. More like recalculation. "Fair enough," Tessa said. They walked the rest of the way in silence. But it was a different silence, the kind that sometimes precedes understanding. Day 8 brought the first crisis. It didn't come from the field. It came from the barracks. Sloane returned from a long evening range session to find her gear disturbed. Nothing missing, but disturbed. Specifically her field data book. The hand-recorded log where every shooter tracks their ballistic data, their range cards, their environmental calculations. It's irreplaceable. It takes weeks to build properly. Hers have been tampered with, pages smeared, critical entries partially eyeable. Sloane sat on her bunk for a long moment, completely still, holding the ruined pages. Her first instinct was anger, hot and immediate. Her second instinct, which one was calculation. Someone here doesn't want her to succeed. She didn't report it. Not because she couldn't, but because reporting would make her the medic who couldn't handle adversity. She couldn't afford that narrative. Instead, she spent 4 hours that night on borrowed light and tired eyes, reconstructing every entry from memory, every distance, every drop, every wind call. Because her father had taught her to commit ballistic data to memory the same way she committed medication dosages. At midnight, Tessa came back from the latrine and found Sloane still writing. Tessa looked at the pages. She understood immediately what she was seeing. "Someone touched your data book," Tessa said. Sloane's pen kept moving. "I dropped it." Tessa's eyes narrowed. That's not she stopped herself, sat on her bunk, watched for a moment. "Who?" Sloane looked up. "I don't know." Tessa was quiet for a beat. Then she said, "I was watching the range earlier. One of the infantry candidates was near your rack." Sloane's eyes held hers. "I don't have a name." Tessa's expression hardened. "Sure, candidate. Shaw. Ranger. He's been making comments since you arrived." Sloane absorbed this without expression. She'd heard the comments. Little things said, just loud enough. Remarks about medics, about field promotions, about how the school was being softened for optics. She sat down her pen. "I can handle Shaw." Tessa looked at her for a long second. "Let me make it simpler." The next day, Tessa Lynn placed her field data book on the table next to Sloane's during the range session with the deliberateness of someone making a statement. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The message was clear. She was watching. She was aligned. Shaw looked at both books, then at Tessa's face. Then he turned back to his own work without a word. It was, by sniper school standards, an alliance formed with total silence, and it meant more than any speech. The shooting began in earnest at the start of week 2. This was the part Sloane had been built for, whether she wanted to admit it or not. The fundamentals, steady hold factors, natural point of aim, respiratory pause, trigger control. Sloan executed all of them with a quietness that made Voss watch her through his own optic from the observation point. He didn't say anything in the first session, but he watched. The unknown distance range came on day 11, a test where candidates fired at targets placed at ranges that weren't announced. They had to estimate distance using mil relation, reticle measurements, or map reading. Then make adjustments and hit first target estimated by Sloan at 640 m, actual 628 m. She hit first round. Second target estimated at 820 m, actual 845 m. She adjusted 0.2 of a mil. Second round, she hit. Third target, 890 m, the furthest of the day. Sloan stuttered the mirage through her scope. The heat shimmer that tells you wind speed and direction if you know how to read it. It was full boil, meaning wind close to the shooter. Slight flutter at distance. She calculated her breath, went out halfway. The trigger broke. Hit. When the range session ended, Voss appeared beside her. During the after-action period, he crouched, looked at her target data card, then straightened. Thatcher, he said, Master Sergeant. He didn't say good. Bus didn't say good. He said, tomorrow's session, your lead candidate in sniper school. That meant she was being watched even more closely, but it also meant something had shifted. Tessa appeared at her shoulder. Lead candidate. Sloan exiled. Don't make it a thing. Tessa's mouth curved slightly. Too late. It's a thing. Shaw walked past them without looking over, but his posture was different. Tighter. Sloan filed that away. The sabotage attempt came on the evening of day 14. Sloan returned to her rifle after dinner break to find the scope adjustment turrets had been turned. Subtly, not obviously, but enough to move point of impact by several inches of distance. It was the kind of change that a casual inspection might miss, but that would cause inexplicable misses during the next session. If she hadn't been her father's daughter, she might have missed it. But Garrett Thatcher had taught her to zero her rifle fresh every single time, like there was no yesterday. Check your zero like you check your weapon always, every time. No exceptions. Sloan rechecked her zero before she put anything away. She found the deviation. She corrected it. She marked the exact position of both turrets with a fine scratch, so she'd know instantly if it happened again. She didn't confront Shaw. She didn't go to Voss. She simply performed on the range the next morning as if nothing had happened. Because the best response to sabotage is flawless execution. The shot of day 15 happened at 930 m. Full crosswind 16 miles per hour measured with a Kestrel and confirmed by Mirage. Temperature 94 degrees. Humidity 62%. The target was a steel silhouette barely wider than a man's shoulders. Every candidate on the line had fired twice without a hit. The wind was tricky, gusting inconsistently, requiring real-time reading, not just an average estimate. Sloan was last to fire. She watched the range for 4 minutes before she settled into position. For minutes of observation, the other candidates fidgeted. Voss stood with his arms crossed like a statue. Sloan breathed. She watched the Mirage. She watched a loose piece of tape on the far target stand. One of the instructors had used it as a flag indicator, and it was cycling in a predictable pattern. Full extension. Settle. Flutter. Repeat. It was giving her a rhythm. She timed her shot to the settle. The trigger broke. The steel rang from 930 m away. The sound came back a long second later. A faint clean ping carried on the hot Georgia air. Voss's voice was utterly neutral. Mark that. Thatcher. Single shot. First round impact. Confirmed. 9:30. An instructor with a laser rangefinder called back. Confirmed. 9:32. Tessa exhaled beside her. How? Sloan was already cycling her bolt. The tape. Tessa stayed at her. Then she looked back at the range. Then she let out a soft single sound that was something between a laugh and admiration. You timed the wind cycle, Tessa said. Sloan's expression was carefully neutral. I watched the tape. Tessa shook her head slowly. Your father taught me to read everything. Sloan finished. At night, in the exhausted quiet of the barracks, things began to shift. The hostility from Shaw became muted, not gone, but quieter, like it had run out of fuel. The other candidates began to ask Sloan questions. Small ones at first. What mil value for this distance? How did you read that Mirage? Then bigger ones. How do you hold steady after physical exertion? How do you manage the mental calculation under time pressure? Sloane answered everyone, because her father had taught her that knowledge shared doesn't diminish the holder. It multiplies the capability of everyone around them. Tessa noticed. You could be competitive about it. You're not. Sloane reapplied cleaning solvent to her barrel. Competitive with my teammates makes all of us weaker. Tessa considered this. That's medic thinking. Sloane looked at her. It's also sniper thinking. You want an isolated operator or force multiplier? Tessa was quiet for a beat. Then where'd you get that? Sloane looked back at her rifle. My dad. The silence that followed was warm. In those weeks, Sloane learned something about Tessa Locken that the other candidates didn't know. Tessa had a younger brother who'd been wounded in muscle. She carried his photo inside her helmet. A kid in a wheelchair at a VA clinic, smiling like he was trying to make it easier for the person taking the picture. Tessa had enlisted because of him. She'd become a marksman because she decided that if she was in the field, she was going to end fights faster, minimize collateral, reduce the chaos that put young men in wheelchairs. When she told Sloane this late at night, voices low, the barracks dock and quiet. Sloane didn't say anything for a long time. Then she pulled out the patch from her father's letter. She didn't say what it was. She just showed it to Tessa. Tessa looked at the intertwined crossie and medic cross. Your dad? Tessa asked. Sloane nodded. Tessa looked at it for a long time. He designed this. He believed in the concept before anyone called it that. Sloane said. Tessa handed it back carefully. Then we're honoring two people every time we do this, right? That sentence stayed with Sloane longer than any range instruction. The final phase of sniper school arrived with the gravity of a closing door. The practical exercises compounded. Moving targets, multiple targets, partner shootings where spotter and shooter worked in concert. And finally, the final field evaluation, a comprehensive stalking and shooting exercise that combined everything the course had built. Sloane and Tessa were paired as a team. Shooter Sloane, sputter Tessa. The exercise parameters were brutally simple. Infiltrate an 800-meter area on foot wearing ghillie suits, avoiding detection by two roving instructors with binoculars. Establish a firing position. Engage two targets and exfiltrate without being identified. They had 6 hours. The Georgia landscape in full summer is a sauna with leaves. The ghillie suit traps heat against the body like insulation. Movement must be glacially slow. Every footfall considered, every branch accounted for. At hour 1, they were 300 m into the infiltration area, and a roving instructor walked within 15 m of their position. Tessa froze. Sloane froze. Two human shapes dissolving into plant matter. The instructor paused, scanned, moved on. Sloane's heartbeat was steady. Her training kept it that way, but her mouth was completely dry and the sweat running down her spine was not controllable. At hour 3, they reached firing position 160 m from the targets, farther than the exercise minimum. But Sloane had chosen the position specifically for the angle it gave over an intervening hill that would complicate any spotter trying to locate their position from the observation point. Tessa settled in beside her, spotting scope aligned. 1060, Tessa breathed. Sloane adjusted. Dialed elevation. Noted wind from the mirage. Wind. She breathed. 12. Slight left to right. Variable at distance. Watch for thermal gusts off the hill. Sloane's eye found the first target. A steel silhouette at the far end of the range. Partially screened by brush. She breathed. She found her natural point of aim. The crosshair settled. Target 1. Tessa whispered, on fire. The shot went. Steel rang. Neither of them moved or spoke. At long distance, the rule is after a shot, hold everything. Any movement identifies position. You wait. You watch. You confirm. The instructor at the observation tower scanned the field with binoculars. Slowly, methodically, nothing moved in the field. Sloane and Tessa were indistinguishable from the brush around them. Confirm hit. Tessa breathed. Target 2 is 15 m left. Sloane shifted her position in imperceptible increments. Moved the rifle slowly, found the second target, adjusted for the slight change in angle. Fired. Steel rang again. And from the observation tower, the instructor's voice came over a radio. 2 hits. Candidates remain unidentified. Tessa exhaled so slowly it was barely audible. Sloan held her position, eyes through the scope, waiting for the CLE signal. It came 4 minutes later. The exfiltration was 2 more hours of painstaking movement, and then they were out muddy, sweat-soaked, exhausted in a way that's sad in the bones. Voss was waiting at the end of this field route. He looked at both of them. Dirt-me-smeed faces, ghillie suits trailing Georgia vegetation, eyes still carrying the particular flatness that comes from extended focus under pressure. He gave them nothing for a long moment. Then he said, "Thatcha, lock-in, master, sergeant," both of them said. Vass looked specifically at Sloan. 2 hits, 2 rounds, undetected at 1060. He paused. Your father knew what he was building. Sloan's throat tightened. Master Sergeant. Voss raised her hand. Don't just accept the result. Sloan pressed her lips together and nodded. Voss turned away, then glanced back once. Graduation is Friday. Both of you are on the top 5 list. He walked off. Tessa stood beside Sloan, both of them looking at his retreating back. Then Tessa said quietly, "Top 5. Sloan nodded a beat. Then Tessa said, "I'm buying dinner." Sloan almost laughed. The almost made it across her face and arrived as a genuine, tired, relieved smile. "You're buying dinner," Sloan confirmed. Graduation was a ceremony without excess drama. A formation. Words from a senior officer. Badges awarded. A photo nobody seemed eager to take because everyone was too tired to hold still. But the badge was real. The U.S. Army Sniper School badge. A simple enough piece of metal, but one that represented months of attrition and hours of precision and weeks of someone trying to make you quit. When they pinned it to Sloan's uniform, she felt its weight as something led. Her own achievement, yes, but also her father's investment. Her mother's FA, every promise she'd made, and the one she'd broken, and the permission she'd received in ink. She felt all of it in a small circle of metal. The major from Harlow's team was there, standing off to the side watching. When the ceremony ended, he found Sloan before she reached the others. Thatcher. Sloan came to attention. "Sir." He handed her an envelope. "Orders," he said. "You're going back." Sloan's eyes didn't widen. She'd expected this. Had felt it coming the way you feel a weather change through scar tissue. "Afghanistan," she said. "Helmand Province," the major confirmed. "New role. We're calling it Combat Medic Sniper. The position is experimental. Your actions and outcomes will inform whether we build a training program." Sloan looked at the envelope. "What's the team?" she asked. The major's expression shifted slightly. Not quite a smile. "You'll recognize some of them," he said. Harlow stepped forward from behind the major, extending a hand. Sloan shook it. "Welcome back to the fight," Harlow said. "Just with better tools." Sloan glanced down at the badge on her chest, then back at him. "Same tools," she said. "Just authorized." She found Tessa after near the edge of the parade field. Tessa's own orders were already in hand. She'd be heading to a ranger support role, a different path, but one that had grown from the same weeks. They stood together in comfortable silence. The way people stand when they've been through something that changed their coordinates and they haven't updated their maps yet. "You gonna write?" Tessa asked. Sloan smiled. "I'll try." Tessa looked at her seriously. "The Thatcher protocol. When they build it, because they will build it, make sure it includes what your dad understood. But it's not about the shot. It's about the decision before the shot." Sloan looked at her. "When did you figure that out?" Tessa tapped her temple. "Day 11, 930 M. You watched the tape for 4 minutes. That's not just technique, that's a philosophy." Sloan took a breath. He used to say, "Don't fire the shot you can avoid, but if you fire, don't miss." Tessa absorbed this. "That's the program." Sloan nodded slowly. "That's the program." They embraced, briefly, the kind of hug that carries information words can't. And then the day moved forward the way days do, pulling people in separate directions while the thing they built between them stayed put. Sloan flew back to Afghanistan on a Tuesday, same as when she'd left. The air hit her at Bagram like an old argument, hot, dusty, full of diesel and urgency. The smell she associated with saving lives and making decisions she couldn't unmake. She rode a convoy to FOB Hansen, this time as a passenger. her sniper kit alongside her trauma bag in the same ruck. 2 identities, 1 operator. When the vehicle stopped inside the wire, Briggs was standing outside like he'd been there since she left. He looked at her for a moment, then his eyes found the badge. Sloan watched his expression do a quiet, complicated thing. "Top 5, he asked. Sloan nodded. Briggs exhaled, then shook his head slowly. "Your dad?" "Yeah," Sloan said. Briggs clapped her shoulder. "Welcome back, document." "It's still dark," Sloan confirmed. "I know," Briggs said. "It's always going to be document. The other thing is just extra." Maddox came around the corner with a cup of coffee, saw Sloan's badge, opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. "Is that?" Sloan raised an eyebrow. Maddox pointed at the badge. "Are you?" Sloan waited. Maddox swallowed. "Did you just?" Fletcher appeared silently at Maddox's elbow and looked at the badge once she passed. Fletcher said quietly. Maddox turned to Fletcher. "She passed." Sloan said nothing. Maddox looked back at her with an expression that had moved from surprise through processing and arrived at something that was underneath all the noise genuine. Doc, Maddox said. "Maddox." He pointed at the badge. "This is, I mean, you went," and he ran a hand over his head. "Okay, I have a lot of feelings." Sloan's expression cracked, just barely. "Tell someone who has time." Maddox's grin broke through. Yeah, she's back." The first patrol back was a mounted reconnaissance. 15 vehicles mapping routes. No contact expected. Low threat. A reintegration day to get Sloan back in rhythm. But the rhythm of Afghanistan has its own tempo. Contact came at her 7. Small arms from a compound to the east. 400 meters. 2 shooters. Standard IED follow-on attack. Trigger the halted convoy. Then engage while heads are down. Sloan was out of her vehicle and into position in under 12 seconds. She didn't wait to be told. She didn't check the protocol. She just acted. Trauma bag went to the casualty side. Rifle went to the overwatch position. 2 minutes in, she confirmed no critical casualties. 1 superficial wound being handled by the vehicle medic. She moved to the elevated position. Briggs was already pointing her toward a knee-high BAM that gave line of sight. 420 m. She didn't need to ask. 1 shooter at a window visible for fractional seconds each burst. Sloan watched the window cycle. Fire. Duck. Fire, duck. Predictable as a metronome. On the 3rd cycle, she was waiting for him. The shot ended the cycle. Second shooter abandoned his position immediately, saw his partner drop, and ran. Total engagement time for Overwatch. 4 to 7 seconds. Briggs looked at her when she came back down. She said, "Casualty." Briggs said, "Minor treated." She said, "Then we're good." Briggs nodded once. "Yeah, we're good." And in those 2 words, something was settled. Not with papers or orders or ceremony, just with a simple acknowledgement that what she could do, what she'd become worked. It was real. It was right. Over the following 4 months, the pattern established itself. Sloan became the system that the concept had promised. Overwatch to casualty care. Casualty care to Overwatch. The seamless operator that 2 separate schools had built from one person's foundation. There were 17 significant engagements. In 9 of them, Sloan provided precision fire before treating casualties. In 5 of them, she treated casualties first, then moved to Overwatch when the situation demanded. In 3 of them, she did both simultaneously, calling fire corrections to other shooters on the radio while working on a wound with 1 hand. The numbers told the story. In those 17 engagements, the platoon suffered 0 fatalities. 14 wounded, all evacuated alive. Enemy engagements ended an average of 4 minutes faster than comparable units without the combined capability. 4 minutes is a long time to bleed out. 4 minutes can be the difference between 2 kids and 0. It's an unclinical way to measure doctrine, but Sloan had never been interested in clinical. She'd been interested in outcomes. Word traveled the way word travels in military communities, along informal channels, in debriefs, and in quiet conversations between commanders. The major called Harlow. Harlow called people who made calls. And 6 months after Sloan graduated sniper school, a proposal came across desks in 3 different commands simultaneously. Funnelize and replicate the Thatcher protocol. The name appeared without ceremony. Someone had called it that in a debrief, and the name stuck the way meaningful names do because it described exactly what it was. The training program would select combat medics with documented marksmanship aptitude, put them through a modified sniper school pipeline with additional trauma integration, and create a small cadre of dual capability operators who could deploy in the gap between pure medic and pure sniper. Sloan found out when Hollow appeared at FOB Hansen again. Same civilian clothes, same shop eyes, same quiet way of moving through a room. He sat across from her in the aid station, and for a moment neither of them spoke. "They are building it," Harlow said. Sloan looked at her hands, ink from map annotations, a faint stain she hadn't fully washed out. "The program," she said. "Named after you," Harlow added. Sloan looked up. "Named after my dad." Harlow tilted his head. "The concept was his. The proof was yours." Sloan was quiet for a moment. She thought about her mother somewhere in a quiet house in Virginia, watching the news and not knowing that her daughter wasn't the thing her father had built. Or maybe knowing and choosing not to look too closely. It was a kind of love, too. The love that lets go because it trusts the person who's walking away. "How many candidates?" Sloan asked. "First cohort is 12, Harlow said. "They want you to help develop the curriculum." Sloan's eyes sharpened. "I'm still deploying." Harlow nodded. "You do both. Consulting the program between rotations. Your operational experience is the curriculum." Sloan absorbed this. "What does the program teach?" Hollow asked, and the question felt deliberate, like a test. Sloan considered her answer for a long time. Then she said, "It teaches that the job isn't to shoot people. It isn't to save people. It's to reduce suffering. And sometimes the fastest path to that is a bullet. And sometimes it's a bandage. And the entire skill is knowing which one applies and having the hands to execute either." Hollow looked at her for a beat. "That's the program," he said, an echo of Tessa's words. "Weeks and half a world away." Sloan looked at the patch from her father's letter pinned above her bunk now. The crosshair and the medic cross. "He was 20 years too early," she said. Harlow nodded. "Most important people are." There was one more shot that defined the year. It came on a cold morning in November when the mountains turned their edges sharp and the valley floor was glazed with frost that wouldn't fully melt by noon. A patrol was operating in a narrow valley. 12 soldiers moving toward a suspected cache site when they found themselves in a situation the briefings hadn't fully anticipated. The valley walls were steep. The enemy had taken high ground at both ends, effectively sealing the approaches. 12 rifles and one gun truck against an elevated force that controlled the geometry. Distances were extreme. Left flank 940 m, right flank 870 m, direct front 1100 m. Normal doctrine would call for fire support, mortars, anything that reaches over the walls. But weather had grounded aviation. Mortar data was questionable due to terrain masking. The call for fire was 20 minutes away at minimum, and 20 minutes was too long. Briggs got on the radio. His voice control, but carrying the particular edge of a man doing mathematics he doesn't like. 6. This is Briggs. We're fixed. Need options. The response. Best available time on mortars is 18 minutes. Briggs looked at Sloan. Sloan was already on the ridgeline. They'd scrambled to a narrow ledge of rock that gave partial view of both flanks. Her rifle positioned north to south across a natural depression. Left flank 940. Possible. Extreme, but possible. Right flank 870. More comfortable, but requires repositioning. Direct front 1100. Do not attempt without a spotter. She keyed her radio. Briggs, I can work left and right. Front needs suppression, not precision. Can anyone give me accurate suppression on front while I work flanks? Briggs, Fletcher's got the gun truck on front. He'll walk rounds. Fletcher's voice confirmed on your signal. Document. Sloan adjusted her position. Left flank first. Enemy machine gun was the priority. Its arc of fire covering the patrol's only withdrawal route. 940 m, cold morning air. Minimal mirage. Wind from the northeast at 9 miles per hour. Temperature 21 degrees Fahrenheit. Density altitude lower than summer. Bullet would hit slightly higher than warm weather data. She adjusted. Found the target. A shape behind a rock outcropping visible at intervals. Briggs' voice. Time is running. Enemy is adjusting. We're taking accurate rounds. Sloan exhaled. Found a window. Pressed. The shape behind the rock didn't appear again. Left flank went quiet. She repositioned fast, but controlled, moving 12M along the ledge to change her angle on the right flank. 870M. Same wind, same temperature, slightly different angle. She found the right flank shooter exposed more than the left, perhaps less experienced. Pressed again. Right flank's fire became sporadic, disorganized, a team without leadership. Fletcher opened up with a gun truck on the direct front, a sustained Bose that forced the frontal threat into cover, degrading their accuracy. Briggs, front suppressed, left quiet, right suppressed. Can we move? Sloan scanned. Left, nothing moving. Right, one remaining shooter scrambling. Front suppressed. Move now, she said. I'll cover the movement. The patrol extracted in 4 minutes. 12 soldiers. 2 casualties from pre-extraction wounds. Both walking, neither life-threatening. As the last soldier came through, Briggs, moving, reared. Sloan held her position until she confirmed nothing was following. Then she peeled back, rifle over her shoulder, med bag already in hand. Briggs found her 200M from the extraction point, moving through frost-hardened scrub. He fell in beside her without slowing. Both flanks, he said. Sloan adjusted her grip on the med bag. The gun truck helped. Briggs shook his head. Both flanks document 940 and 870. Cold morning. That Sloan cut him off quietly. How are the casualties? Briggs paused, then walking superficial. Sloan nodded. Then let's get them treated. Briggs watched her for 3 more steps. Then he said something low only to her. He'd be proud of you. Sloan's jewel worked silently. She looked straight ahead at the white, gray sky. After a moment, she said, I know. And she did. That night, she wrote to her mother. Not about the shots, not about the program being named after their name, their family, the man her mother had loved and feared for and mourned in a way that was still not finished. She wrote about something else. She wrote, Mom, I think I finally understand what Dad was trying to say. He wasn't making me into a weapon. He was making sure I'd never be helpless. There's a difference. I see it now. I think you knew it, too. And that's why it scared you. Because the knowing meant you couldn't protect me from the world the way you wanted to. But I want you to know everything he put in me, I'm using to bring people home every single day. That's the promise I'm keeping now. She sealed the letter and put it in the outbound mail pile. Then she cleaned her rifle. Then she resupplied her trauma bag. Then she slept the clean, deep sleep of someone who has found the place where 2/2 of themselves stopped fighting. 3 months later, the FO cohort of the Thatcher Protocol training program convened at a facility that didn't appear on public schedules. 12 candidates, 9 combat medics, 3 18D Special Forces medical sergeants. Their lead consultant flew in from Helmand Province on a 24-hour window. She stood at the front of a room that smelled like gun oil and antiseptic, and she looked at 12 faces that were trying to figure out what they were supposed to become. Sloan put her hands behind her back. She let the silence breathe for a moment. Then she said, Most of you came here carrying one identity. Medic, you save lives. That's the whole thing. That's everything. Nothing wrong with that. I held it for years. She paused. Some of you have marksmanship backgrounds. You're used to the other weight, the other kind of precision. She walked the front of the room slowly. Here's what this program teaches. It doesn't teach you to love both. It doesn't tell you to be comfortable with both. It teaches you to be honest about the fact that in the specific environment you operate in, you will sometimes face a moment where the fastest way to save a life is to end a threat, and that doing so doesn't make you something different. It makes you more of what you were always supposed to be. She stopped walking. You're not warriors who happen to know medicine. You're not medics who happen to shoot. You are operators whose entire purpose is outcome, and you will use every tool available to achieve that outcome with a minimum necessary cost. She let that sit. Then she said, My father spent his life believing this was possible. He was right. Now we build it. Someone in the room raised a hand. A young medic, probably 24, trying to keep the question steady. Corporal Thatcher, he said, What's the hardest part? Sloan looked at him for a moment. Then she answered, "Honestly, the hottest part," she said, "is the moment before you decide. After that, the hands know what to do." She reached in her breast pocket and held up the patch. 12 faces leaned forward, the cross intertwined. The private design of a Delta Force captain who left no public record, who raised his daughter in dual languages of saving and protecting, who wrote a letter she almost never got to read. "This is why we exist," Sloane said. She pinned it to the board behind her. "Now let's get to work." Outside, somewhere across the wire and the wire after that, across the distances that had names on maps and unnamed cars in other places, the conflict continued. It always continued. There were radial lines that hadn't met her yet. There were distances she hadn't closed. There were lives that didn't know they were waiting. And somewhere in that continuation, Sloane Thatcher, who had once promised to be only one thing, was returning to the work of being both in the way her father had believed in and her mother had feared and the Army was learning to formalize. The first round downrange in the inaugural Thatcher Protocol session rang steel at 600 m. Clean, cold, controlled, and 3 seconds later, the candidate who fired it was checking a simulated casualty with the same hands. Doc, if this story moved you, if the image of a medic's hands reaching for a rifle and a bandage with equal precision stayed with you, subscribe now, because this channel exists for the stories that don't make the headlines. The operators who broke the mold, the people who proved the impossible is just the untested. And there are more of them, far more, each one a version of the same truth. That human capability, when built with the right foundation and directed by the right purpose, finds a way every single time. Thanks for watching. Don't miss what comes next. Extend the script 2,000 words. M.O. The Georgia clay had long dried from Sloane's boots, but the lessons it carried hadn't. Back in Helmand, the war had a way of testing everything you thought you built. It didn't care about school badges or protocol names or letters from dead fathers. It cared only about the next 5 seconds and what you did in them. The second rotation was different from the first, not quieter. Nothing in Helmand was ever quiet if you paid attention, but different in the way a second marriage is different from a first. You know more, you carry more. The weight is familiar but heavier because you understand it now. Sloane knew her reputation had preceded her. She'd seen it in the eyes of the soldiers at the FOB briefing on day one of the new rotation. New faces, mostly with the exception of Briggs and Fletcher, who'd extended, and Maddox, who claimed he stayed because the food was better than Fort Bragg, which was a lie that everyone accepted because the truth that he didn't want to leave the team would have required an emotion he wasn't built to express. The new faces looked at Sloane with a specific kind of curiosity that she recognized. It was the same look she'd gotten at sniper school, just with different math behind it. At sniper school, they'd wondered if she belonged. Hey, they'd already decided she did, but they wanted to see it, needed to see it, because reputation is a story someone else tells. And the only way it becomes real is when you write a new chapter in front of them. She gave them that chapter on day 11. A clearing operation in a contested village, mud-walled and maze-like, the kind of closed terrain that turns distances into meters and thinking time into nothing. The platoon moved in 2 elements, and Sloane was attached to the second, moving through a narrow alley that smelled of cooking fires and animal musk. A shot came from a rooftop 30 m, almost intimate by her standards. The soldier ahead of her dropped, not dead, but spinning, hand going to shoulder, rifle clattering. Sloane was moving before the sound finished echoing. She pulled the soldier against the wall in one practice motion, her body covering his while she assessed the wound. Entry and exit clavicle area bleeding significant, but not immediately catastrophic. She packed the wound with one hand and keyed her radio with the other. Shooter, north rooftop, second structure, left 15 m elevation behind her. A new soldier, Corporal Reed, 22, quickied, and steady came up in a crouch scanning. OT from here, Reed said. Sloane finished her pressure dressing. Hold this firm pressure. Reed's hands replace hairs on the casualty. Sloane moved to the alley edge, staying in shadow, and looked up at the rooftop angle. The shooter had gone back to concealment. Smart, waiting for movement before firing again. She didn't have her precision rifle right now. She had her M4 and a problem. She solved the problem differently. Reed, when I move right, you put rounds on the rooftop. Parapet, don't stop until I'm back. Reed, moving you now. Sloan, moving in 3. She went on 3, moving fast and diagonal across the alley mouth while Reed fired covering bursts. She reached the opposite wall, pressed into it, got angle on the rooftop. The shooter had risen to engage Reed. Sloan put 2 round center mass. Total elapsed time from casualty to threat neutralized. 41 seconds. Reed looked across the alley at her. Then he looked at the casualty he was still holding pressure on. Then he looked back at Sloan. How do you do that? He asked. Sloan moved back across, checked her casualty, confirmed the dressing was holding. Do what? Read both things at the same time. Sloan didn't answer immediately. She checked the pulse on her casualty. Strong. The man was conscious, pale, looking up at her with a desperate gratitude of someone who's been told the story isn't over yet. She squeezed his shoulder. Stay with me. Dust off in 10 minutes. Then she looked at Reed. You don't do both at the same time. You do one, then the other, then the other. You just get fast at the transitions. Reed absorbed this. How fast can you get? Sloan's expression didn't change. Fast enough. It was the kind of answer that wasn't an answer, but Reed filed it away and spent the rest of the rotation watching her every time the situation got complicated. Because watching her was an education that no classroom had figured out how to replicate. The Thatcher Protocol's second cohort was running concurrently back in the States. Sloan received updates from the program's lead instructor, a master sergeant named Bowen, who had the organizational mind of a surgeon and the patience of someone who'd stopped caring about shortcuts 15 years ago. Bowen's reports were thorough and honest. 8 of the 12 FIRS cohort graduates had been placed in operational units. Free had already demonstrated the combined capability in live situations. The early data on outcomes was, in Bowen's words, compelling and politically inconvenient for people who didn't believe in it. Sloan read that line twice and almost smiled. The political inconvenience Bowen referenced was real. There were voices in the institutional framework who believed the program was overcomplicating roles, that a medic who shoots blaze accountability lines, that a sniper who treats casualties takes eyes off the sector, that dual purpose creates divided attention in moments that demand singular focus. Sloan had heard these arguments. She thought about them seriously because she respected the people making them even when she disagreed. Her response when asked was always the same. I understand the concern about divided attention, but the assumption behind it is that the two skills compete for the same mental resource. In practice, they don't. Trauma assessment is a physical protocol that your hands run while your eyes run threat assessment. They are parallel processes, not sequential ones. The brain is not a single-channel radio. She'd heard that argument from her father's letter. She'd proven it on 17 engagements. The institutional resistance didn't disappear, but it quieted. The way resistance always quiets when the evidence stops, giving it room to breathe. On the 43rd day of her second rotation, Sloan made the shot that would eventually be cited in every Thatcher Protocol curriculum briefing for years afterward. Not the longest shot of her career. That record would come later. Not the most tactically complex, but the one that illustrated the concept with a clarity that even the most skeptical analyst couldn't argue with the situation. A vehicle breakdown had left a 3-truck element stalled on an open road, exposed while a threat force of approximately 14 personnel attempted to maneuver for a flanking position. 2 casualties from the initial contact, 1 critical. Sloan was managing the critical casualty when the flanking element broke into the open at 460 m. Moving fast, the gun truck was oriented the wrong direction and couldn't pivot in time. Briggs shouted for anyone with eyes on the flank to engage. Sloan looked at her casualty. Tension pneumothorax needle decompression in progress. Patient's breathing stabilizing. Procedure 30 seconds from complete. She finished the needle decompression. She set the patient's hand on the device to maintain position. She said to the soldier beside her, "Hold. Don't let go. If he stops breathing, you tell me." She picked up her rifle. She put rounds on the lead element of the flanking force. 3 shots, 3 hits, 8 seconds. The flanking movement stopped. She set the rifle down. She went back to her casualty. Briggs and 2 others handled the disorganized remaining threat while Sloan continued the trauma care. Dust Off arrived 9 minutes later. The critical casualty survived. After action, Briggs sat beside Sloan near the vehicle and said nothing for a full 2 minutes. Then he pulled out a battered notebook, the kind he used for patrol notes, and wrote something down. Sloan looked at him. "What are you writing?" Briggs held up the notebook without turning it. "Case study for the program." Sloan blinked. Briggs looked at her with that particular expression of his direct, unadorned. "You think I don't know what we're building out here? Every time you do this, Sloan, it's data. And data is what keeps the program alive. When the people who don't like it go looking for reasons to shut it down." It was the first time Briggs had used her first name. Sloan didn't comment on it, but she heard it. "You're submitting an ARS directly to the program?" she asked. Briggs nodded. "I've been since month 2. Sloan exiled slowly. "Hollow arranged that." "Briggs, who do you think asked Hollow?" Sloan looked at him for a moment. Briggs closed his notebook. "You didn't think the program was surviving on reputation alone? I thought it was surviving on results." "Briggs, results need advocates always. You know that." Sloan absorbed this. The quiet, unglamorous infrastructure of an idea that was trying to become a fact. The way it needed people like Briggs doing paperwork in dusty vehicles, as much as it needed her making shots on ridge lines. "Thank you," she said. Briggs shrugged. "Buy me dinner when we're stateside." Sloan tilted her head. "You and Maddox have the same line." "Briggs, he stole it from me." Late in the rotation, a letter arrived from Tessa Larkin. Tessa was 8 months into her ranger support role, operating in a different province doing the work she trained for. The letter was short. Tessa wasn't a long letter person, but it contained one paragraph that Sloan read until she memorized it. "I've been watching what the program produces. The second cohort has a candidate named Morales, 26, medic from the 82nd. She reminds me of you, the way she looks at a problem from 2 directions at once." She asked her instructor why they called it the Thatcher Protocol and not just the program. The instructor told her it was named after a combat medic who made 5 shots at 750 m and then went back to treating casualties like she just stepped away to check a map. Morales said, "That's not a protocol. That's a standard. I think she's right. Keep setting it." Sloan folded the letter carefully. She put it in the same breast pocket as her father's letter. 2 letters now. 2 voices saying the same thing from different distances. On her last night, before rotating home, Sloan sat on the HESCO barrier near the aid station and looked at the mountains. They were beautiful in the dark, more honest than in the day. The shapes were clean, and the stars above them were unreasonable in number. The kind of sky that exists only where there are no lights to compete with it. Maddox came and sat beside her without being invited, which was exactly his style. They were quiet for a while. Then Maddox said, "You coming back?" Sloan looked at the mountains. "Yes." Maddox nodded. "Good." A pause. "Maddox. Documents, Sloan." "Yeah." "Maddox. The first time at the convoy when you picked up that rifle," he stopped. Seemed to be organizing something he'd been carrying for a while. "Were you scared?" Sloan thought about it honestly of missing. She said. Maddox frowned. "That's it." Sloan looked at him. "That's the only fear that matters in that moment. If you miss, someone dies who didn't have to. Everything else is noise." Maddox looked at the mountains. "Your dad teach you that, Sloan. He taught me the shooting. I figured out the rest." Maddox nodded slowly. "What's the rest?" Sloan's answer came quietly, like something said to the mountains as much as to him. That you allowed to be more than one thing. That the skills you carry don't define what you love or what you protect. That a weapon in the right hands isn't a contradiction of a healer. It's a completion of one. Maddox was quiet for a long time. Then in a voice much softer than his usual register. "I'm going to write that down." Sloan looked at him. "You keep a journal." Maddox started 1 month too. Something warm moved through Sloan's chest. "What do you write about?" Maddox shrugged, suddenly uncomfortable with the sincerity he'd accidentally stepped into. "Stuff people what it's like out." He paused. "You the things you do what it means." Sloan looked back at the sky. "Make sure you spell my name right," she said. Maddox laughed, and the sound of it carried across the dark FOB like a small, stubborn light. They sat there until the cold came down off the mountains. Then they went back inside, back to the work that would start again at dawn, and the war that would keep asking its question What are you made of? And the answer Sloan Thatcher would keep giving rotation after rotation, engagement after engagement, shot after Kafel, shot, everything. She was made of everything her father built, and everything her mother feared, and everything between those two poles where she had decided to live, the medic and the marksman, the healer and the protector, the soldier who came home and went back and came home and went back because the people on either side of the wine needed someone who could do both. The Thatcher Protocol would eventually train 4 to 7 operators across 3 cohorts. 6 of them would make significant shots in combat operations within their first deployment cycles. All 6 would also manage casualties in the same engagements. 0 fatalities in those engagements. 0. That number, more than any range record, more than any ceremony, more than any letter or badge or name attached to a program, was the one that mattered. Sloan kept it in her head like a fixed point. And every time the world offered her a reason to doubt the concept, she came back to 0. 0 is not luck. 0 is a standard. And somewhere out there, a candidate named Morales was learning to set it. And after her, someone else. And after that, someone else. The line stretching forward, patient, precise, and alive in the direction Garrett Thatcher had pointed it with a daughter's hands on the compass. If this story moved you, if you felt the weight of those 2 letters in that breast pocket, if you understood what it means to be given permission to be everything you are, subscribe now and stay with us, because this channel tells the stories of the people who rewrote the rules by refusing to accept that their limits were real. There are more of them waiting, and every single one deserves to be heard. The mountains never stopped watching. That was the thing about Helmand that nobody put in the briefings. The landscape had a quality of witness to it, as if the stone ridge lines and dry riverbeds had absorbed every conflict that had ever moved through them and was simply waiting for the next chapter to begin. Sloan had felt it from her first deployment, but now, deep into her 3rd rotation, she felt it differently. Not as a threat, as a context. She was part of the landscape, now, in her own way. The 3rd rotation brought new variables. The Thatcher Protocol's first cohort graduates were beginning to deploy independently. And for the first time, Sloan was operating alongside one of them, Staff Sergeant Elena Morales, the same candidate Tessa had written about, who had called the protocol a standard rather than a name. Morales was 26 and moved through the world with a particular kind of coiled readiness that reminded Sloan of herself at that age. Though Morales would have rejected the comparison because she was deeply, genuinely competitive, and being compared to the person the program was named after felt less like a compliment and more like a shadow, Sloan understood that she gave Morales space. She didn't mentor aggressively. She simply operated and let proximity do the teaching the way her father had always taught. Not through instruction, but through example made visible. The first time they were in contact together was a route clearance operation through a valley that narrowed dramatically in its final kilometer, creating a choke point that the platoon's intelligence assessment had flagged as elevated risk. The assessment, as it turned out, was conservative. Contact came from 3 sides simultaneously. A lay ambush that had been prepared with more patience than the platoon had anticipated. The initial boast caught 2 vehicles and put 4 soldiers down in the first 40 seconds. Sloan went to the nearest casualty. Morales went to the second. No discussion, no assignment, just 2 operators moving to the problem. Briggs was on the radio calling contact reports. His voice at that particular controlled register. That means the person using it has accepted the situation and is already 3 steps ahead of the crisis. Sloan worked her casualty blast injury, right leg, turn applied, breathing intact, while her eyes tracked the threat geometry automatically. She heard Morales' voice from 15 m away, steady and clear, identical in cadence to Sloan's own. "I've got him. Airways clear. 1 tourniquet, left arm, pulses strong." Sloan felt something complicated and quiet move through her chest. Not pride exactly. Something more structural than that. The sensation of a thing being confirmed. The concept wasn't her anymore. It was them. She finished stabilizing her casualty, moved to overwatch position, whacked the left flank. Morales finished her casualty, moved to the opposite angle, worked the right. 2 operators, 2 roles, one seamless function. Briggs, running the radio and managing the gun trucks, said nothing in the moment. But in the AR afterward, when the vehicles were back inside the wire and the dust was still settling from everyone's gear, he said something that Sloan would later quote in the curriculum. I stopped thinking about it as two medics. I stopped thinking about it as two snipers. It was just coverage. Complete coverage. Every angle, every need. Nothing fell through. Nothing fell through. Morales sat across from Sloan in the debrief, and for the first time since they'd been operating together, looked at her directly, not with competition, not with the weight of a reputation she was trying to escape, but with something more honest. They said you did it alone? Morales said. Sloan. The first time, there was no one else. Morales. That's harder. Sloan looked at her. Not harder, just different. Alone means no coverage gaps. It also means no backup. Morales absorbed this. Which would you choose? Sloan's answer was immediate. This, always this. She gestured between them. Your father ever tell you that the best operators operate in pays? Morales blinked. My dad was a paramedic. Sloan almost smiled. Same principle. Morales looked at her hands for a moment. That specific medic habit of checking your tools when you're processing something. The program is changing, Morales said. The third cohort curriculum is different. More integration, less separation between the shooting modules and the medical modules. Sloan nodded. Bowen sent me the update. Morales. They added a section. Philosophy of the dual operator. She paused. They used something you said. Sloan, which part? Morales reached into her kit and produced a printed page course, curriculum formatted with the program header. She read the weapon is never the problem. The hands are, the heart is, the discipline is. Corporal Sloan Thatcher. Thatcher Protocol, inaugural address. Sloan looked at the page for a long second. Then she said, quietly, that was my father's line. Morales looked at her. Then it belongs in the curriculum twice. There was a silence between them that had the quality of something settling, sediment dropping still water, finding its level. Outside, the generators hummed. A distant helicopter crossed the sky in a long diagonal. The mountains kept their watch. Sloan reached into her breast pocket and touched the folded edges of her father's letter through the fabric. A habit she developed without noticing. The way you develop any ritual that anchors you to something important. She thought about her mother's letter, still unanswered on her desk back home. 3 pages she'd started and not finished because the right words kept arriving in the wrong order. She made herself a promise. When this rotation ended, she would finish it. Not because the war had changed, but because the daughter in her deserved the same attention she gave everything else. Morales was watching her. You okay? Morales asked. Sloan looked at her. I'm good. Morales, you went somewhere. Sloan, I come back. Morales nodded, accepting this without pressing. Another quality the program had built into its operators, the understanding that some distances are internal and you leave people to travel them in their own time. On the final week of Sloan's third rotation, a mission brief arrived that carried the particular weight of something significant. A high-value individual had been tracked to a compound in a contested district 14 kilometers from FOB Hansen across terrain that offered no easy approach and 3 obvious kill zones. The operation required a sniper element for overwatch and a medical element for the assault team. The brief assigned Sloan to both officially on paper. For the first time in her career, the operational order listed her role as combat medic sniper, Thatcher Protocol, not attached to either element, assigned as a third function, independent and integrated simultaneously. She read the order twice. Then she put it down and looked at the ceiling of the TOC for 30 seconds. Briggs was watching her from across the room. First time, they put both on the same line. He said, Sloan, yeah, Briggs, how does it feel? Sloan considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. Like a door that was always there, she said, and someone finally put a handle on it. Briggs nodded slowly. Your dad would have. Sloan held up a hand, not to stop him, but to hold the moment before it moved past. Because in that small gesture was everything she'd learned about carrying the people you love into the work they prepared you for. How you don't let the emotion overwhelm the function, but you don't cut it off either. You let it sit alongside you. You let it fuel the patience and the precision and the purpose. She lowered her hand. I know, she said. The operation executed cleanly. The objective was achieved. No friendly casualties. Sloan provided overwatch through the breach phase, transitioned to the casualty collection point during consolidation, and cleared 2 minor blast injuries before the extraction birds arrived. On the helicopter back, she sat in the red-lit interior with her eyes closed and her hands open in her lap, empty of both rifle and bandage for the first time in hours. And she breathed. Just breathed. The rotors beat their steady language overhead, and the dark mountains moved beneath them, and the wall continued below in its patient geological way. But for 4 minutes at altitude, there was only the breathing, and that was enough because she would be back. She always came back. The mountains already knew it, and so did the 12 faces in the next cohort brief, and the one after that, and the one after that. Each of them learning to carry 2 things at once without dropping either. Each of them adding a chapter to a story that had started in a backyard in Virginia, with a father's voice behind a child's shoulder and a target at the end of a long, patient distance. Front sight breath press. Thanks for watching.